Good afternoon. This is New Frontier Data. We will start our webinar in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar presented by New Frontier Data in partnership with greenRush. Today, we will be taking a look at the increasing opportunities in the e-commerce and delivery services sectors where delivery markets are permitted. My name is Gretchen Gailey, Executive Vice President of Communications and Government Affairs at New Frontier Data, and I will be your moderator. Just a few quick housekeeping items today. Today's event is going to be recorded and will be made available to you after the webinar. We will send out an email to view the on-demand webinar as soon as it is available. Second, please enter your questions using the GoToWebinar control panel, which is located on your screen. You can start entering any questions you may have now. We'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of our presentation. Now let's take a look at the agenda for today's event. First, we will introduce our speakers and their respective companies, then jump into our main presentation, and finally, we will end with our Q&A. We will take as many questions as our time permits. We want to thank Jude Widman and Rachel Shipp of greenRush for being here with us today and providing some great data for us to report on. Now, before we jump into the meat of our webinar, we'd like to ask you a quick poll question. What is going to be the largest cannabis market in the world in 2018? Israel, Spain, Canada, California, or Massachusetts? We'll give you a few seconds to put in your answers. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We will reveal the results after we hear from all of our speakers. Please remember, as we are going through our presentation, to send in your questions. Now to meet our speakers. First, we have Giada Guire-DeCarcer, the founder and CEO of New Frontier Data. Giada, can you tell us a bit about yourself and about New Frontier?
Thank you, Gretchen. Hello, everyone. Thank you to the hundreds of attendees joining us today. I'm very excited to be partnered with greenRush on this first of its kind report covering fast-growing online cannabis market in California. I'm Jed Aguirre-DeCarcer. I'm the CEO and founder of New Frontier Data. I'm very proud to be a leading business intelligence, data collection, and analytics reporting provider in the booming cannabis industry. In terms of what we do, we collect millions of data points across every aspect of this industry. We then deliver them to you in the form of industry reports, customized studies, as well as via our online real-time interactive portal, Acrio. We help investors identify opportunities in this space, assess essential and potential risks, identify ways to mitigate such risks, and ultimately determine target returns in this unique space. We also support cannabis businesses increase their profitability and optimize their overall operations by helping them align their products and services with actual demand. In essence, we're connecting them with the customers willing and able to purchase their products and services. Again, welcome to today's webinar in which we are unveiling our latest report, Cannabis on Demand, Evolving Trends in California's Medical Market. As noted, in partnership with greenRush, leading cannabis e-commerce platform in this industry. And thrilled to have greenRush's VP of Investor Relations, Rachel Shipp, and greenRush's VP of Analytics and Strategy, Jude Whitman. Thank you, everyone, again.
All right, thank you very much, Giada. Next, we'll go to Rachel Shipp, as Giada said, the VP of Investor Relations and Business Development for greenRush. Rachel?
Thanks, Gretchen. We're thrilled to be here and are very excited for this first annual on-demand report. Before I go into background about myself, I did want to give a high-level overview of who we are at greenRush. greenRush is the largest online marketplace in cannabis. We are a technology and marketing platform that connects retailers and patients, or retailers with patients and consumers. greenRush does not actually deliver the product. We merely facilitate the online transaction and the retailer then fulfills the order. As the largest online marketplace in cannabis, greenRush currently has nearly 40,000 consumers. We have over 20,000 products and over 400 retailers on the platform. We are currently operating in 3 states, California, Nevada, and Colorado, and will be expanding to everywhere cannabis is legal in the next 12 to 16 months. Now, a little bit of background on me. I have over a decade of experience in consulting, consumer banking, and asset management. I spent the last 4 years at BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, and prior to that was at Bank of America and PwC. I joined greenRush 10 months ago and now lead our business development and investment-related efforts. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Rachel. Next, we will go to Jude Whitman, the VP of Analytics and Strategy for greenRush. Jude?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So as greenRush's Vice President of Analytics, I drive greenRush's mission to be a world-class data-driven cannabis company through 3 primary dynamics, and that's analytics, innovation, and automation. And we here at greenRush believe that those 3 principles are going to drive the future of the cannabis industry: analytics, innovation, and automation. So what greenRush does on a daily basis, as Rachel outlined for you, is partner with cannabis retailers and brands to deploy modern e-commerce technology fueling their growth. And I just want everyone to be super clear that in this process, greenRush is collecting a vast pool of data with which to understand cannabis consumers, retailers, and brands, and that data is going to be invaluable to helping us understand the aggregate cannabis economy, which is exactly why we partnered with the very capable team at New Frontier, and we look forward to share our information with everyone joining us.
Thank you very much, Jude. Next, we have John Kagia, the Executive Vice President of Industry Analytics at New Frontier Data. John.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure and couldn't be more excited to be joining greenRush on the discussion of the on-demand marketplace in California and the opportunity that this industry represents. Over the past 3 years, I've had both the pleasure and the privilege of leading the team that has been producing the research, industry analysis, and delivering the market insights that New Frontier has been bringing to market as a independent, objective, and neutral perspective on the growth and evolution of the legal cannabis industry. Having built my career working in market research and industry analysis across a range of sectors, from technology to government solutions to financial services and the nonprofit sector, I've had the pleasure of working in a broad range of sectors, but I've never worked in a sector that represents the scale of opportunity, the speed of growth, and the trajectory of expansion that we see in legal cannabis. And the information that we're going to be presenting today is just one aspect of this industry that we think will be part of this transformative evolution as we see this transition from illicit cannabis to legal cannabis. And we very much look forward to a robust discussion today about the opportunities that we see.
Thank you, John, for those insights. Would you like to take it from there and dive into our findings?
I would love to. Thank you, Gretchen. So we have a tremendous amount of information and insights that we've gathered through this collaboration with greenRush. But because we have a limited amount of time today, we really wanted to key in on 5 areas that we think will be important to understand as we look at the on-demand environment. So first, we're going to put this all in context. We're going to look at the growth of the legal cannabis industry. And then we'll start to drill in and look at who the online cannabis consumers are, what are their demographics, and what do they look like. We'll look at the transaction trends. How are they shopping? When are they shopping? How much are they spending? And then specifically look at, within the product categories, what products they're buying and how the products that they're buying have been trending over time. And then before we get to questions, we'll close out with an insightful perspective from the greenRush team on 5 key strategies for success for retailers that are looking at the on-demand environment. So to kick us off, let's begin by looking at why legal cannabis and why now? What opportunities do we see in legal cannabis? One of the questions we get all the time is whether legal cannabis is a flash in the pan or whether it really does represent a true long-term opportunity. And one of the reasons why we're so convicted that the legal cannabis industry is an industry that is going to be here to stay is because of how quickly public support has evolved for this issue. Based on the National Opinion Research Center's General Social Survey, the leading cannabis public opinion poll, we've seen support for legalization jump from less than 20% in 1973 to 57% in 2016 and rising. And why that's important is that it's jumped 10 percentage points in just the past 4 years, and it's up 20 percentage points in the past 20 years. With the growth of popular support happening that quickly, one of the things it means is that it's going to be very difficult to put, as we say, to put this genie back in the bottle, because this is an issue that, by and large, the majority of Americans now solidly support. Rachel?
Yes, thanks, John. Sorry about that. So just Serge, what's really interesting about this is that cannabis is legalized at the state level. So people are voting on this. And as this public momentum continues to increase, we will see more and more states legalizing some form of cannabis laws on the book, which just expands the opportunity for all of us.
Absolutely right. So what does this mean for the market? How big is this industry going to become? Looking just at the states where it is currently legal, including the states that voted to legalize medical or adult use in November 2016, plus West Virginia, which earlier this year became the latest state to legalize medical use. By New Frontiers models, we forecast that just in 2017 alone, the combined medical and adult use industry is going to be valued at nearly $8 billion. And that's going to double in size by 2020 to $16 billion. By 2025, we forecast that we're going to be looking at a total market of $24 billion. And this makes this industry, and particularly the adult use portion of this industry, arguably one of the fastest growing sectors of our economy. Tremendous opportunity and explosive rate of growth. Now, a couple of things about these numbers that are worth calling out. One is that these are just the retail sales side of the industry. By that we mean sales to medical patients or sales to adult use recreational consumers, either via purchases made in dispensaries or by purchases made by online platforms like greenRush. This does not include all of the ancillary products and services that support this industry, ranging from cultivation lights to legal services that are all critical to this industry. And when all of those additional sectors of the industry are folded in, we truly do see an industry that is very, very significant in scale.
Yep, so something I love this chart because it shows us just how large the opportunity is and how fast it's growing. But something very unique about cannabis that can be lost in looking at some of these numbers is that we don't actually need to create new demand in this space. So all of these figures, John, as you mentioned, only represent the legal market. And as of today, the legal market represents only about 13% of the total market, meaning 87% of sales are still done in the illicit market. So today, cannabis is well over a $40 billion industry. And so what's happening with these numbers is much of the growth is not necessarily about developing new demand, but about moving those illegal transactions into a legal market.
That's an absolutely critical point, Rachel, and we think it's doubly important because unlike most other new novel industries where you have to educate the customer on what it is they're buying, with cannabis, the customers already know what it is. You're just changing where they're purchasing it from, and that's one of the reasons why the growth has been so explosive when new markets are activated. So why is California, within this broader explosive industry growth, so important? Well, I hate to steal Gretchen's thunder from the poll question, but the legal cannabis industry, but California is going to be the most important and the largest single market in the world. It is the first state that, as the sixth largest economy in the world, California is going to be the first state that legalizes cannabis, that gives us a view into what national level legalization looks like. And second, when you marry the three dimensions that we think make California particularly exciting, technology and capital from Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, marketing and media from the LA area and the very strong media environment in California, and then the exceptional cannabis cultivation expertise, particularly in the northern parts of the state, in the Emerald Triangle. You have 3 points: cultivation, technology and innovation, and marketing and media, which will be accelerants to the modernization, the increased sophistication, and the maturation of this industry.
Yeah, not only I think is this important from a growth standpoint, but now California, will be the leader for setting the trends in products and consumption behaviors and regulatory rules and frameworks, where previously the community or the cannabis community, relied largely on Colorado and Washington data, which are both just much smaller markets from a population standpoint and total consumption standpoint. So from an investor standpoint, I think this is really important for investors who will now have loads of new data to make business decisions, and very important for business operators who can look to the California market for trends and lessons learned to develop the best business practices as new states come online, and as they build those businesses across all of those new locations.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So let's start to look specifically at the data out of the greenRush platform. And to begin with, who the customers are. Based on analysis of where the orders are being placed in California, we found that there was a very, very strong representation of consumers from the Bay Area, specifically San Francisco and Oakland being the two largest markets. But broadly speaking, 55% of the consumers on the greenRush platform came from cities within the San Francisco Bay Area, which is understandable given that you have such a high technology community and ecosystem there, that for the very tech-savvy consumers in that market, it's entirely understandable and logical that tech-savvy consumers who are already shopping online, who are very digital savvy, would apply those expectations for the way they buy and shop to cannabis. And that would be one of the reasons why we've seen such strong adoption there.
And yeah, and this is Jude. And adding to that, obviously San Francisco Bay Area is greenRush's home base. We're based out of San Mateo, just south of San Francisco. And there's 7 million residents. There's Silicon Valley, et cetera. But in aggregate, the population is 1/3 that of the greater Los Angeles area. So why would the vast majority of greenRush's on-demand cannabis sales occur within the Bay Area, given the population disparity? And really what it comes down to at its most fundamental, besides being our home market, is that the regulatory environment in Southern California is tremendously more volatile than the Bay Area. And so because cannabis businesses of all variety, from cultivators to technologists to retailers to brands to manufacturers, are able to function in a much more stable regulatory environment in the Bay Area, that trickles up to services like greenRush, who aggregate those businesses and present those businesses to the public. So I think that's in large measure the explanation. And the interesting thing is that as we look to begin collecting information on sales within other recreational markets, especially Nevada and Clark County, the greater Las Vegas metropolitan area, we're seeing a similar sort of regulatory stability for the most part. Obviously, there's all kinds of other issues that newly minted recreational markets are running into, but as a baseline, having a stable regulatory atmosphere is tremendously positive for the industry as a whole.
Great point, Jude, and that's one of the reasons why legalization in adult use legalization in California and the new rules that will try and normalize some of the ways in which legal cannabis is regulated in the state will be so important moving forward. So who's shopping online? The overwhelming majority of the on-demand buyers are millennials. They are 18 to 34, 80% are 18 to 34 years old, which makes them with an average age of 29 years old. And one of the reasons why this was particularly striking to us is when this number jumped out at us so much that we actually compared this to looking nationally at cannabis usage rates. And we found that by comparison, only about 58, 59% of cannabis users, or past month cannabis users nationally, are millennials. So significantly greater proportion of millennials in the on-demand market, and that may be partly due to the digital divide issue. While the consumption may not be, or while broadly speaking in the population, cannabis consumers may not be as a large percentage of the population, millennials being much more digitally connected, it does make sense that they would be the earliest adopters of on-demand services.
And to add a little bit of color on that, just to get down to the absolute, clear picture of the GreenRush business, over 90% of orders placed on greenrush.com are orders from a mobile device. So these are literally cannabis patients within California who are navigating on their phone, browsing thousands of cannabis products, choosing them and purchasing them on their phone. So it makes a lot of sense that we're seeing this this clustering of millennials, certainly. But I also want to point out that GreenRush has a nice variety of ages as well. We have a very nice patient who is 88. I think she might have just had her 89th birthday, actually placing an order on the platform. So it's certainly not restricted to millennials.
Absolutely, and we actually, based on everything else we're seeing in the industry writ large, Jude, we're seeing such strong adoption amongst boomers with their cannabis use, and indeed they're some of the fastest growing consuming groups, cannabis consumer groups. So we expect to see more mature demographics adoption increase very dramatically in the years ahead.
Absolutely.
Another interesting distribution that we found in the GreenRush consumer profile was that 70% of the consumers were male. And interestingly, even though there was such a strong male-female split or skew toward the male population, the spending between men and women was about even between the two groups, with men on average spending only about $2 more at $71.27, whereas women spending just about $69. So even though a predominantly male consumer group for this online consumer, or for the online demand market, the spending between the sexes was about even.
Yes, we were actually a little bit more surprised at this result than the age demographics. When you look at the entire retail universe, so the universe outside of cannabis, women represent more than 70% of purchase decisions. So looking forward, we do expect this to even out on the platform, as we grow and as marketing restrictions loosen. I think as a retail and tech platform, it's very important to consider women in your marketing and branding efforts, as they clearly represent a huge opportunity from a marketing and purchasing perspective in the space. So, like I mentioned, I think in next year's results, we'll see this be much more of an even split between male and female.
Agreed. So let's drill into the spending transactions for this on-demand market. Looking at the average spend per consumer month over month between January 2016 and April 2017. Interesting to note that by and large in 2016, spending was about flat, just under $70. But you've seen since the beginning of the year, the beginnings of an upward trend in spending. And it'll be really interesting to see how the spending continues, both as cannabis legalization, full adult use legalization becomes active in California and you bring in all of these new consumers into the marketplace. And then B, as you have consumers become more familiar with on-demand shopping relative to purchasing in stores. And the idea of purchasing cannabis online, either for delivery or for in-store pickup, becomes more normalized amongst consumers who generally have not had access to this sort of consumption solution before.
And absolutely. So my role previous to greenRush was working as an operations manager at Postmates, which is on-demand courier service that many of you may be familiar with. And I believe that there's a similar dynamic happening in our business that we saw at Postmates, which is essentially that your first few orders for on-demand delivery, you're not exactly sure if it's going to work. You don't necessarily want to invest in an unsuccessful experience, et cetera. And so your average transactions, your average basket sizes are going to be lower the first few orders. But as you become more familiar with the platform and you have transactional success with the platform, your average basket size increases. We're also doing a number of we're employing a number of innovative strategies and technologies to boost average order totals, including providing deal generation for dispensaries, so dispensaries can create their own deals, et cetera. We'll get into that a little bit later. But you know, one thing that I think is really interesting is that since April of 2017, obviously we've continued to analyze the data, and what we see is that there's actually a strict bifurcation between transactions processed online on the retailer site. So the dispensary has their own website. greenRush has the ability through our Green Label technology to power e-commerce for that dispensary's own online transactions. That average ticket price is about $110, and the marketplace, the greenRush marketplace, average ticket price has hovered somewhere between $75 to $80, which is consistent with what you're seeing in April 2017. And so I think what's really interesting about that to note for those of you who are listening who are dispensary retailers is that it is extremely powerful to process your own transactions through your own website. We see that retailers who have a little bit of marketing savvy see the promise of e-commerce, who offer great deals, great customer service, and great medicine or cannabis products, you know, really have very high average ticket prices.
Thank you, Jude. Illuminating. So how much of our online consumers spending? The average transaction value was just over $70. It was nearly $71 at $70.67. And interestingly, the average discount applied to that transaction value was approximately $5.20, or about 7% of the unadjusted retail price. This is important, and the greenRush team is going to illuminate this a little more. But it underscores the role in which discounts are playing in both customer acquisition and in influencing customer retention. It's worth noting that while the average first-time transaction value is only marginally less than the total average transaction across the platform, you did tend to see higher discounts applied to first-time buyers, which equated to about $7 per transaction, or about 10% of the purchase price. And to Jude's point earlier, these incentives do play a role in, or higher incentives for the first-time buyer are important because it gets them into the system and allows them to experience it for the first time. And then once they become a customer and have an understanding of how the process works, then you don't need such extensive inducements in order to sustain their purchasing behavior.
Yeah, that's right. So again, we always look to the retail space outside of cannabis, and promos, deals, discounts play a very critical role in customer acquisition and retention. So it's not surprising that it also plays a critical role in cannabis. As Jude mentioned, something very unique to the greenRush platform is that we built a proprietary and sophisticated deal section that actually allows retailers to set their own promos and deals. So what that means is, based on our data, we suggest the best deals and promos to offer. So think of the time of day or day of week on offering various happy hours or discounts. But ultimately, it's up to the retailer to approve and offer them to the customer. So from an investor standpoint, when you look at the deals and promotions offered, it's still very important. Deals and promotions, clearly, they will increase your customer acquisition costs. For the first time, the discount or the deal is a little bit higher to get them actually in the door. But we found that it's still statistically meaningful for driving that customer acquisition and retention, and ultimately increases the lifetime value of the customers. So it's very important to work through, that first time discount and what that means for your business, and then what the ongoing promos and deals mean for the retention of that customer.
Absolutely right. So when are the on-demand cannabis consumers shopping? Well, unlike the weekday shopping, unlike the in-store shopping, where you do see a much greater fluctuation in what days of the week customers are buying, for the online shoppers, Friday and Saturday are the busiest days of the week, accounting for about 33% of transactions. But by and large, the shopping is pretty flat, pretty even the rest of the week. So they may be gearing up and buying the cannabis on the weekend or going into the weekend, but then shopping remains relatively consistent through the rest of the week. But where it gets...
Yeah. Oh, no, John, go ahead. I was going to say, something just on that day of the week is it's a very big value proposition for greenRush in that we offer this e-commerce platform, so we can kind of smooth out the ride for retailers, and it allows customers and patients to access these products and retailers on their own schedule. So it's offering both that choice and convenience, which allows them, like I said, there's a little pop in Friday and Saturday, but it's substantial activity on all days.
Exactly right, and in fact, that's a perfect segue into the insight into what time customers are shopping. Buying cannabis is largely an evening activity. 42% of transactions happen between 6 p.m. and midnight, and over a quarter of transactions, 28%, happen between midnight and 6 a.m. So there's a couple of points here. One is dovetailing on Rachel's point about helping retailers smooth out their shopping. And it's that the online platform, like greenRush, give retailers an opportunity to be driving sales even when their brick and mortar stores are closed. But second, it also underscores the imperative of understanding who your customers are and when they're buying, so that you can be stocked appropriately in order to serve your customers during peak demand.
That's right. You stole my thunder. It's all about, we use this data to inform our retailers on helping them staff for peak demand, and informing them, obviously it may not make sense from an economic standpoint to be open from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. if that's only 7% of your business. But clearly to be staffed up appropriately at the end of the day to really optimize that consumer shopping experience and get the most out of how much volume is being driven then.
Exactly right. So what are these on-demand shoppers buying? Here we see the portfolio of the main product categories, which include flower, concentrates, edibles, pre-rolls, accessories, and topicals. And broadly, flower still accounts for the overwhelming majority of product being sold on the greenRush platform at 70%. And the next closest category is concentrates at 22%. That was actually higher than we had expected it to be, given the sophistication of the California market, but it speaks specifically to the audience of who the on-demand buyers are.
Exactly, and so we expect that flower is gonna remain the dominant product category, but it will as you're going to see in the next slide, make up a decreasing proportion of an increasing pie.
Exactly right, Jude, and really striking to see that just in the 16 months between January 16 and April 17, you've already seen a 12 percentage point decline in the share of flower. And your point, Jude, is really important, because it is not that flower sales are declining, it is that the share of flower to total sales are falling. So there's still an enormous amount of flower being consumed. The amount of flower being consumed is growing month over month. But because there are so many new products coming to the market, and consumers are really responding positively to these new products, then we're seeing a pie that's increasing and the share of that pie that flower represents decreasing.
100%, and we expect to see this decline in share of the market to continue, probably somewhere down to 55% is our best guess, especially in a recreational market where vapes and pre-rolls are perhaps a slightly more palatable entrance for first-time consumers in a recreational market.
That's right. That's right. So how much are they spending on flower products, given it's such a dominant category? In looking at the average prices of these products by different package sizes, ranging from 1 gram to 1 ounce, we found that the average prices were about in line with what you would expect to see in a retail cannabis environment. But what really jumped out at us was how wide the difference was between the minimum and the maximum price points. On average, we saw a 13 times difference between the low and the high price point. And for an ounce, I mean, there's retailers offering an ounce at $40, there's retailers offering an ounce at $445. That spread represents the very significant variance in quality that's available to consumers, and it suggests to us two things. One is really important to know who your customers are and how much they're willing to spend, and B, while we do expect some downward price pressure on retail flower as the market matures, there's going to continue to be an enormous amount of options available to consumers to meet both their product preference and price point spending capabilities in California.
So this is a really interesting dynamic where you're seeing on the greenRush platform a lot of experimentation on the part of retailers with loss leader products, et cetera. But what I would expect to see in the future, and we should all be keeping an eye on, is with the dramatic growth of branding. We all know that branding has a lot to do with the structure of pricing, right? So when you have an Opus One fine wine compared to a Sutter Home, they're not necessarily dramatically different in quality, although of course they are, but the pricing is disproportionately large between the two. And we're going to see that with cannabis products as well, where the craft, the high-end, the exclusive brands are going to literally have $80 grams of flower, and the Sutter Homes are going to be retailing for $5 or less.
That's right. That's right. So just quickly, we did also want to show you a quick slide on the vape market, on the concentrate market, because it is the fastest growing non-flower category in the market. And within the concentrates, vapes, shatter, and wax really are the primary products that are selling. We're seeing explosive growth in the vape sector in particular, because as Jude said, they're a more approachable product for people who are relatively new to cannabis. And they also do offer a measure of discretion that's greater than you'd be able to get if you're trying to smoke a joint or smoke a pipe with a smoke that's produced there. But broadly speaking, very significant demand in the concentrates market, and in a sector that we expect to grow very substantively in the years ahead. So greenRush is our masters at the online sales market. And in that context, we thought it would be really valuable if they could share their perspectives on 5 key strategies for retailers who are going to be entering this online market.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so these are 5 strategies that greenRush openly shares with our retail dispensary partners as they begin to establish an e-commerce presence. The first is, and all of these are fairly obvious, I think, but if you're used to a non-online, a more standard style commercial experience, these may not necessarily be top of mind. So it bears detailing them out. So first of all, you know, like any other product online, photos sell. So use of crisp professional images is absolutely critical. You can have the best products in the entire world and take crummy pictures of them and put them online, and I guarantee you that they will not sell, and their ranking will actually drop on the greenRush Marketplace algorithm, and even though those are wonderful products, they simply will not be purchased by consumers. The second is to process your own orders. So as I spoke to earlier, we see much higher average transactions when dispensaries offer e-commerce on their own website. So if you have a dispensary anywhere in a legal market and you're interested in providing no upfront cost e-commerce solutions for your patients or recreational consumers, please feel free to reach out to me, Jude at greenrush.com, and we'll have that discussion. The second is to be real with your customers. You know, this holds true for any industry. Customers expect retailers to be honest and upfront with them about what is offered and how much it's going to cost. It sounds a little bit simple, but it is true. We have to provide customers with accurate and detailed information that we stick to. And the fourth point, which is similar to point 3, is to maintain consistency on the prices themselves. So I think that there's a tendency between different marketing and advertising mediums for retailers to list different prices for the same products, and that definitely irks the consumer. So I recommend keeping all of your prices consistent across all of your different advertising and marketing mediums. And then the last is, you know, where would we be as a cannabis industry if we didn't have genuine passion and love for the products themselves? And, you know, consumers who are purchasing cannabis products obviously love those products. They have an affinity for the plant itself, the culture that it represents, the history that it represents, and sharing our own passion for those products with our customers is extremely important.
Powerful insights, Jude, and really points we hope that folks entering the on-demand space will pay very close attention to. So we're running up on time, and I do want to make sure we have some time to answer our audience questions. So I'll just very quickly run through some of the key takeaways we'd like you to be aware of. One is know your audience. Know what they're buying, know when they're shopping, and tailor to them accordingly. Second is plan for where the market is going. For example, we know that flower sales are declining as a total share, and concentrates, vapes in particular, are gaining share very quickly. Don't plan your operations just based on what you're seeing happening now. Begin to plan for how you're going to shift your operations as the market matures. Third is branding is critical. We have seen an explosion of new products, new companies, new brands, new retailers entering this market. It's going to be absolutely important that you present a high-quality, resonant brand to your target audiences to make sure that your target audience, your target customers, can identify you from within this increasingly noisy environment. Fourth is deals matter. Whether you like it or not, as Rachel said, it's going to increase your cost of customer acquisition, but it's a really important way to get your customers in the door. So plan your budgets accordingly, and use those deals appropriately and judiciously. And then fifth, which is absolutely critical, is this is just the beginning. We have adult use legal now in 8 markets. Of those, only 5 are operational, and only 3 of them are entering the early stages of maturity. So there's enormous room for growth in the coming years. And in that context, we think the opportunity specifically for online shopping for cannabis is going to be very, very explosive. So with that, we'd like to answer some questions from our audience.
All right, thank you, John, Gene, and Rachel, for all those insights. Now we will head into our Q&A and take as many questions as time permits. I know that we started a few minutes late, so I will be mindful of that, and we'll run a few minutes over. Please remember to send in your questions at any time using the GoToWebinar control panel. Now, generally, I reveal the results, and everyone's dying to find out, but since John stole my thunder, and many of you seem to be just as smart as John, yes, 83% of you said California would be the largest market in 2018. So, yay, good for y'all. All right. Let's get started with a question here for Rachel, which I'm sure many are wondering, especially since you have an online platform. Can customers make purchases with credit cards?
I'm smiling. It's a great question. So on the greenRush platform, you cannot yet make a purchase with a credit card that goes through that you put your credit card in online, like what you would consider like a normal customer, retail transaction. What we do allow is if retailers and dispensaries are accepting credit cards on their platform, a consumer can filter by those types of retailers and select those products for delivery or express pickup from those retailers. So when the delivery agent actually shows up to your door or you go pick up the product, that's at that point of time you can swipe your credit or debit card. But most of our transactions at this point, because of the current banking environment and kind of the grayness of being able to accept credit cards, most of the transactions are done in cash. The last thing I'll say about it is something very unique that we're looking at is creating kind of a Bitcoin solution or a closed loop solution where we will begin to allow customers and consumers to purchase greenRush points or greenRush wings through their debit and credit card, and then as they make the transaction, those we then kind of decrease the number of points or wings that were associated. So that's considered a closed loop solution and does not break any federal banking laws or anti-money laundering laws. But for the time being, we do not accept credit cards on the platform.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. The next question we're going to give to Jude. Have you seen a concentration of your buyers? Are there particular profiles of neighborhoods, or what kind of demos are you seeing? Are they geographically located?
Great question. So as we said earlier, greenRush consumers are concentrated fairly heavily in the Bay Area. But in terms of demographics, I think it's really the age disparity that we've seen. So heavy concentration of millennials. We expect that to sort of bleed out over time and have different age groups, different generations adopt the platform and begin ordering. Additionally, the disparity between men and women, the 70-30 split that we saw earlier, we expect women to account for an actual majority of on-demand cannabis consumers relatively shortly in the near future. Within the next 12 to 16 months is our anticipation. So that's going to be a pretty major shift. In terms of neighborhoods or demography, I mean, the point is that greenRush is an open marketplace that allows all different classes and types of cannabis consumers to find the products that they desire. And so from the lowest income neighborhoods to the highest income neighborhoods, we're seeing heavy use of the platform.
Okay, the next question I have here is going to go to John, which may be a tad difficult to answer, but I'm sure you'll have something. How do you see things changing with the legalization of the recreational market in California?
Can I get Jude's question? Great question, actually, and a really important one. And maybe I'll actually riff on what Jude just said about seeing kind of distribution across all types of neighborhoods, all sorts of socioeconomic status. One of the things that's really striking about cannabis use is how egalitarian it is. Cannabis users represent the entire socioeconomic and demographic cross-section of American society. And that's entirely true in California. So post activation of the adult use market in California, we expect to see a few things. One is just a very strong surge in demand as you pull consumers who have been in California's very active illicit market into the legal environment. And that surge in demand is going to be as true in dispensaries as it is going to be online. Second is this shift we are seeing from flower to non-flower products. For consumers who've been predominantly in the illicit market, it's very difficult to get some of these higher value non-flower products because the guy around the corner is not necessarily going to be selling high quality tested vaporizers blended with organically grown cannabis. Those sorts of high value non-flower products are principally the domain of the legal market. And as cannabis consumers in the adult use market come into dispensaries, go shopping online, and discover these products for the same time, we expect to see a very, very strong interest and growth in the demand for vapes in particular, but also concentrates and edibles in the years ahead. It's going to be a very, very lucrative market.
The next question we have would be going to Jude. How do you explain 1 ounce selling for $40 and another ounce selling for $445? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we're surprised when we see those numbers as well. I think that there might be some. The $40 ounce is probably an ounce of shake, which is like the residual cannabis left in a large supply, like a pound or multi-pound bag. And the $445 ounce is probably the highest grade, medical craft cannabis that one can purchase. So there is definitely going to be variation in product quality, the sourcing of the product, whether or not it was organic or not. And like I said earlier, I think that brands are going to really make the difference in the pricing structures as we move forward here. We should expect to see branded flower especially to increase in per unit value relative to the current pricing structure.
Okay. Next for Rachel. On your platform, have you noticed how important are photos for selling products? Do you see a big difference between flower versus edibles or concentrates? Do you see certain demographics lean towards better photos or not?
I can actually take that. So on the photo side, I mean, photos are just critical across the board for online sales, just point blank period. Great photos are necessary to sell your products online. As far as the different product categories and their photos, I think that they're all equally important, except for flower products. Flowers are extraordinarily difficult to photograph effectively in a way that's beautiful and clean. One professional tip that I could provide for all of our listeners is find yourself, if you're serious about doing cannabis e-commerce, find yourself the best food photographer that you can possibly afford. There's something about food photographers, they're used to taking pictures of difficult lighting, difficult textures and variations in the actual products themselves, and they've proven in our business to be well adept at photographing flower.
Okay. John, we have a question for senior citizens. If we don't see them going to dispensaries, how are they getting their cannabis? Are they doing it through delivery, or people actually delivering to assisted living homes?
Excellent question. And there's 2 points there. Broadly speaking, cannabis use amongst boomers, the 65 plus, is significantly lower than usage rates within the broader population. However, amongst those who are consuming cannabis, we see a number of points of access for cannabis. One is having younger friends or relatives who are acquiring the product for them and making it available for them. In the 3.5 years that I've been in the space, I've lost track of how many times people tell me that they went to a dispensary and bought product for their grandparents, for an ailing loved one, and delivered it to them. But one of the emerging opportunities we've been seeing that to me is actually fascinating is the idea of retail opportunities being directed at assisted living communities. So you have a residential community of older, retirees or people in later stages of life. They have physicians on site who can be used to write recommendations. And in that sort of environment, then being able to deliver product, have product brought in to serve the members of that residential community does represent an interesting opportunity. And we've actually seen just in the past 2-3 months residential communities around the country really starting to see this as an opportunity where they bring people in to educate the residents about what cannabis is, how to use it, what they should be buying, and then they set up structures and relationships that enable that product to be brought on site. So they're getting it a range of different ways. Some are shopping themselves, but there are many who are purchasing for them, there are many younger kind of family members or friends who are purchasing for their older family members.
All right. We have a few minutes left. I'll probably take 2 more questions. Is anyone pricing in new taxes that are coming out and discussing the impact of taxes and regulations on the margin?
Sure. So this is one of the most important dynamics that we're going to see in January 2018 in California as the adult use taxation system is implemented. We have some inklings of it from the Las Vegas cannabis market, which legalized adult use in July of 2017. And basically, I think that retailers are shocked. I think they're shocked that there's a robust regulatory and licensing system that is that they must adhere to, and that the taxes are as high as they are. The taxation system definitely has an impact on the margins in the retail space, and I think that that's something that sophisticated business professionals should be considering in a very serious way as they're doing economic modeling and forecasting for their burgeoning businesses. It's not prohibitive by any sense. Cannabis is still an extraordinarily high margin product overall, but it is an important factor to consider.
And I would just add to that, because that's an excellent point, Jude. Taxes are an important factor here to consider because they're going to have an inflationary effect on pricing. But for businesses as well, there's in this new California regulated environment, just the cost of compliance will make that the cost of doing business will be higher than it used to be. Given all of the new rules that are being put in place and the requirements that are going to be required, that are going to be that businesses are going to need to meet in order to obtain licenses or maintain those licenses. So there's going to be 2 potential price pressure points. One is the taxes, but the second is also just the higher cost of doing business, fueled in part by the higher regulatory burden that businesses are going to need to meet post-legalization than they did in a loosely regulated medical environment up to date.
Okay.
Hey, Gretchen. Gretchen, could I add just briefly there really quick, because I think that this is extremely important. So not only are the taxes an inflection point which inflate the prices of cannabis products overall in legal markets, but services like greenRush, not to plug ourselves too much, but services like greenRush increase the efficiency of dispensary retailers. And whenever you increase efficiency, you end up raising your effective margins. As an example, one of the end games that I'm most excited about with greenRush's ability to aggregate all of this data is, say for a dispensary delivery service in San Diego, I want to be able to cross-section every single zip code in San Diego, and using our data actually provide the dispensary retailer the exact number of deliveries that they should expect in a given hour, in a given zip code, and which products themselves, which categories, and which specific products they should expect to retail. These are all efficiency mechanisms that allow them to increase their margins over time as they operate their businesses with the assistance of ancillary technologies and services like greenRush.
Okay. We have time for one last question. This is going to be a lightning round for you, Jude. What kind of demographics does your platform capture?
So we are in, let's make no bones about it, we are a marketing and technology company, but we are also a data aggregation company. On a particular transaction, we are collecting almost 1,000 data points on the retailer, the consumer, the products themselves, every possible metric that you can imagine related to that transaction, and then you multiply that by millions and eventually hundreds of millions of transactions. And so the amount of data that we're able to capture and analyze and deploy for the benefit of our partners, our dispensary and brand partners, and ourselves is going to be fairly remarkable.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jude and Rachel, and thank you, John. I know you guys could go on probably for another 3 hours.
We could.
However, we are out of time. Thank you to everyone for your questions, and thank you to our panelists. Also, a big thank you to our audience for joining us today. As an added bonus for participating in today's webinar, we will knock $50 off of our latest report. Just use the promo code greenrush and purchase the report at www.newfrontierdata.com/cannabis-on-demand, and you can get all the insights that you would like. If you would like more information about New Frontier Data or greenRush, also please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. As mentioned, a recording of this webinar will be sent out later this week to all of our participants. Have a great day.